Well, good afternoon. I'm so delighted you are here. I always love being with my friends, my brothers and sisters at Unity Church of the Hills. My name is Dr. Roger Teel, in case any of you don't know me. Um, I have been a New Thought minister for 43 years, and I retired from that in March of 2019. Most recently, for 25 years, I served as senior minister of Mile High Church, one of the largest New Thought centers anywhere, and am now its minister emeritus, and I still do some things for it. But I love doing other things and working with churches I care about. As a little bit of a background, I think it was 1997 or 98, I and a number of New Thought ministers of very large ministries got together and formed the Association for Global New Thought. And our whole vision was to take New Thought from being what some call the best kept secret to being something that connected with other groups, organizations, researchers, leaders who are of similar mind to us, similar teachings and orientation, and to get us out into the world and relating to these folks and doing projects. And we did projects like the Season for Nonviolence for many, many years, which we opened every year at the United Nations. We did synthesis dialogues with world spiritual and social leaders. And halfway through each of these three that we did, the Dalai Lama joined us and took the conversations to a higher level. And many successful conferences. So we did a lot of things like that. And the reason I tell you this is that one of our greatest supporters, volunteering his time, his energy, his commitment, was your beloved Reverend Steve Bolin. And that's where I got to know Steve and his great dedication. And then when I wrote my book in 2014, he said, come on out, sell some books, do a workshop. And so I did that. And by the way, you can find out about that book and other things if you choose on my website, rogerteel.com. At any rate, I came out and spoke and I said, Steve, you've got a lovely ministry here, a really sweet ministry. The people are tremendous. Your campus is beautiful. I feel great energy and consciousness here. And I got to come back too. He kept inviting me back. And the more I came out there, the more to your wonderful place, the more I developed an affection for you all. And I know that there was a time when after Steve retired, there were some challenges in your ministry, and the leaders thought to be taking you forward were not the ones that ultimately would. And so I came out after that and spoke again and met with your board and began, a while later, the board asked me if I would consult with them and help them bridge into a new chapter and help them prepare to very successfully attract their next senior minister and stabilize and grow this incredible ministry. Because here's what I want you to know. Unity Church of the Hills is a fine, fine New Thought center, one of the finest. And what I know is that not everything works out all the time, but if we hold the vision and love what is working and love something that makes a difference like this center, then we're guided and the right things come along. So that's a little bit about me and how I've stumbled into your midst. And again, I'm grateful for doing that. And I'm grateful to you for your love and support. Now, we're going to be doing a webinar today for 2.5 hours. Now, I just want to right off the bat reassure you that there will be breaks. So you're not going to be plastered in front of your screen entirely. And of course, you have the power to take a break anytime you want, but there'll be some times that you'll have a break. And for these 2.5 hours, I'm going to invite us to go understand the 6 stages of empowered change. And the program is called Bridges to Breakthrough. And I tell you, I used this twice at Mile High Church. One time when I became senior minister in 1993. And no church, even one as great as Mile High, is always smooth sailing. And it had had some very rough times that resulted in them asking me to come back after I'd been away for about 4 years. Having previously served as an associate minister, I went away for 4 years and they asked me back to be senior minister in 1993. And when I did come back and I took the pulse of the congregation, I realized we need to heal. Mile High needed to heal with the changes and the upsets that had occurred prior to my arriving there as senior minister. And so I developed this program to step by step over a 6-part series to lead us in the mechanics of what it takes to go from pain to possibilities, to bridge from what was to what can be. And it worked beautifully. In fact, there was so much healing that we wrote love letters to both of the ministers that had been involved and the people who had left, and got about the greater vision of Mile High. And over those 25 years, we did some phenomenal things. The congregation grew to almost 10,000 people. We built a huge community center in addition to our original 800-seat sanctuary. And then in 2008, we opened up our 1,500-seat sanctuary, a beautiful dome structure. And so what I know is the wonderful things that we did couldn't have happened if we didn't face the challenges that had gone on in 1992 and 3, and if we didn't do the things we could do to heal. But once we do heal, the sky is the limit. And that's what I've experienced. The other time that I used it at Mile High was to help the congregation move through my retirement. And so as a part of my structured plan of transition, in addition to naming the 2 lead ministers who replaced me, I resurrected this program, and we did it again. And in each of the cases that we did this, we actually had a physical bridge on the platform, and every week we'd put a plank in that bridge until it was complete. So I'm going to ask you today to just imagine that there's a bridge in our midst, and you can put the planks in along with me and build that bridge into breakthrough territory for yourself and for our beloved Unity Church of the Hills. And this is what is exciting about this afternoon, is I want you to be equipped personally for dealing with the changes going on. And heaven knows, we're in seas of change that have been whipped up amazingly. And we need the tools to work with those, especially as they most intimately affect us. And what we're doing here today, every plank in the bridge, all of the 6 stages that I'll be going over are integral to us empowering Unity Church of the Hills to enter successfully into its next beautiful chapter. So in doing this, I'm excited that it might have a personal benefit to you, and I know it will have a collective benefit for this precious ministry. So once again, thank you for giving your time today. And a few other things before we dive into the material. You might want to have your camera available, your phone. Does anybody still have a camera? Have your camera and have the photo thing available. And I'll be using some PowerPoints through this. And you might want to take some snapshots of those so that you have easy access to them. Now, your staff there and the board is going to make a recording of this available. And I don't know how and when they'll do that, but it would be nice if you had the affirmations and the PowerPoints available to you, okay? You might want to take some notes as well, especially as this pertains to you. And as I said, we'll do a break, and this is being recorded. And also, there will be, with each of the 6 stages of moving from breakdown to breakthrough, in each of those 6 stages, we will pause for some time of reflection. And I encourage you to write down just a few bullet points for yourself. Take a picture of the question that I put up there, and then make some bullet points for yourself. 3 of those 6 times we'll be asking you to actually type in your responses, your feelings, your insights, your ideas. Type them into our chat, which is here on the bottom. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, you just bring your cursor over the bottom and you see things pop up, and there's a chat button there. And the board is asking you to actually input to them your feelings, thoughts, ideas via this chat. Now, here's the thing. This chat will be confidential. You will not be able to see other people's input. So it's a private place for you to put that chat in. And Tammy Lorraine, the wonderful staff member, Tammy Lorraine, will be collecting all of these, presenting them to the board so that they get a sense of your input. And then the board will respond to that with their own thoughts on September 27th, Sunday, September 27th at 1 p.m. in what's called the virtual board gathering. So it'll be a Zoom session where the board can respond gratefully to all that you have input. And your fellow members on the board very much are doing their best to keep things transparent, to learn from what has happened, and to create a strong foundation to go forward. And I'm helping them with that as best I can. So three times we'll actually ask you to type them in. But remember, it's confidential. Nobody else on this webinar will be able to see them. And this webinar is my gift to this wonderful ministry. And I would invite you, anytime we receive good, it's important, if our life is to grow, for us to be in the cycle of circulation. And so I invite you at some point today to text a love offering for the experience that we're having, a generous love offering to Unity Church of the Hills. And right now I'm going to show you how you do that. So here we go. Let's see. All right, so you should be seeing this on the screen here. I'll get things started here. All right, so here's how you do it. Text UCOH love to 77977. UCOH love to 7797. And I just invite you to keep the circulation of good going on in your life, and to really support not only this webinar, but to stay actively supporting your wonderful church, so that as things are healed with this pandemic, and you're able to come back on campus, you will find a vital, powerful, wonderfully prepared arena for you to continue your spiritual journey, both you and your family and friends. All right. So with that, we're going to come back here. And all right. I think we are ready to begin. All right. I'm just putting a few things in place here. All right. So bridges to breakthrough. It's time to build some bridges. You know, chasms show up in life, whether it's people who become disgruntled with one another, breakdowns, unexpected changes, things happen. And it can feel like you're estranged from your good, that there's this gap, this gulf. And how can it be bridged? You know, inevitably, stuff happens in lives, heartbreaks, losses, breakdowns, unexpected shifts, things crumbling. And it's so easy to stay stuck in those circumstances and in our reactions to those. And in so doing, then things tend to erode even further, and we suffer more than we need to. But there is this possibility. There's the possibility of building bridges, step by step, especially emotional and spiritual steps. And these will lead us from breakdown to breakthrough, from pain to possibility, from the past to a productive future, from where we are to where we ideally can be. So today is about becoming expert and passionate bridge builders, and also then to bridge our beloved Unity Church of the Hills into its next chapter of growth and greatness, while at the same time equipping all of us to use these things in our own lives. Bridges. You know, bridges are structures that provide connection and transition from one space to another. So I ask you, where in your life is it time for connecting, for connection? And are you in your life in some kind of transition? Have the winds of change been blowing strongly in your life? Many, it's true for many. And I just wonder, how are you dealing with it? For many, they descend into sadness. Stress increases exponentially, and lots of fear, lots of fear. But I tell you what, it will not serve to just try to put a Band-Aid on this or sweep this stuff under the rug. Times of great change, we're in them, to be sure. It's our tendency in a space of fear to focus on how bad it is and how limited we are, how bleak and confining it all seems. An analogy I like to use is think of a pie. Now, a little slice of that pie is what we know, what we're clear that we know. For me, that is a very tiny slice. And the slice right next to it, equally tiny, is what we are clear we don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't know. I don't know how to play bridge. I don't know calculus. There's a lot of things I don't know. So there's what I know and what I don't know. And then what's the rest of the pie? The rest of the pie is what I don't know. I don't know. And that is the realm of possibility. What I don't know, I don't know. And so you see, bridging is an open-hearted, childlike willingness to allow the universe to lead us into what we don't know, to lead us into the unrealized and always available possibilities for our lives. So there are some stages that we can work with. And if we lean into them and do them honestly and honorably, we find that we actually create our own bridge into something greater. And we're no longer dragging the dead weight, the ball and chain of the past along. You see, many people don't do this healing work. And so when things change and they try to recreate things in their life, they tend to pull into that new possibility their old pain, their old judgments, their old stuff. And it pollutes the new and really robs them of the great good that they could have. So it's important to face what we need to face, clean it up, heal it, so that when we create a new space, it's really new, it's ripe, it's fertile for good things, great things to unfold. That's what I invite you to do in your own life. And that's what we're doing together on behalf of Unity Church of the Hills. So let's take the first stage. Let's look at the first plank. Think of these as planks in a bridge or stages, however you choose. The first step or plank in building a bridge is accepting change. Accepting change. Now, you cannot build a bridge by holding on to what was. You just can't. You can't build a bridge by standing in resistance to the flow of change. Change happens. Change is the play of life upon itself. And no one of us is immune to it. And especially nowadays, so much change. In my book, which is called This Life is Joy, I write, in the tribal wisdom of the Lakota Indians, there is a saying, if you discover that the horse you are riding has died, it is best to dismount. So where in your life are you riding a dead horse? Understand, as I continue to write in my book, there is no need to whip a dead horse, no need to pray for the horse to be resurrected, no need to try to convince yourself or others that the horse is just napping. There's no need to hire a consultant or visit a therapist to figure out why the horse won't get moving. There's no need to go around proclaiming that the horse isn't dead, it's just living impaired. And certainly there's no need to call your friends together yet again to complain about that dead horse. How about getting off it? That's the key. Make the changes that are shouting at you from all sides. Change can be the healthiest, most life-giving of all experiences. So I ask you again, where in your life have you been riding a dead horse? Something's finished, it's over. Or you're clinging to something in your life. Consider that change is one of the most soul-enriching of experiences, if we can make our peace with it. This stage is called accepting change. Coming to that place where we stop resisting. You see, I think three things sometimes happen. We pretend, We cling and we resist. Change comes along, and a lot of people pretend. They say that nothing's changed. They pretend it's not real. They try to sweep it under the rug. And they say, oh, changes have happened, but I don't hurt. And yet they really do. So pretending is not an effective way to deal with change. And then there's clinging. Clinging. We cling to what was. We cling to the former people, the former things, the former ways. We cling to a false security that we had invested in the way things were, in the status quo. Ram Dass declares, when we cling to what changes, we suffer. When we cling to what changes, we suffer. A lot of people suffer because they cling rather than accepting that this too shall pass. Everything comes to pass. That phrase, and it came to pass, is one of the most common in the Bible. Perhaps knowing instinctively that everything is temporal. Everything in this universe, our relationships, our bodies, the stuff of the universe, situations, they come into form for a time and they serve in some way, and then they fall away. Fall gives way to winter, but it's not a death. Eventually there will be a spring and a greater lushness comes forth. But we tend not to flow with this, the constant currents of change, and we cling. And we resist. Oh yeah, we resist. We have to so often be dragged along the path of our evolution. How many times have you required what I sometimes call the cosmic 2x4 to come along and hit you upside some part of your anatomy to get you going, to get you, rather than stuck and clinging, to moving and flowing with changes? Now, I know that changes aren't easy, but what if we didn't resist? Let me tell you a story about a lady that I know. Her name is Pam, and Pam was, in one chapter of her life, very successful in breeding, raising, and training horses. In fact, she was very highly thought of in this career line and was making a significant six-figure income in doing this. And it was family-based as well. But more and more, Pam told me that she was feeling like it was time for change. And there are those times when something in us says, as great as this is, it's time to change. That happened for me. After 25 years of a phenomenal experience as senior minister of Mile High Church, 43 years in the ministry, something within, it was a spirit-led thing, said, Raj, you need to go into a new chapter. And it won't be easy, but you need to do it. And so I had to let go. But Pam didn't readily let go, even though something in her wanted to change. In fact, she had a secret dream. And her secret dream was to go into stand-up comedy. That's quite a change from training horses to being a stand-up comedian. And anybody she had the courage to share this with thought she was crazy, and except a very few trusted folks. And but so she decided, well, it's just a pipe dream. I won't do it, even though she continued to be haunted by it. And then one day she was working with this certain horse, and the horse reared and kicked her in her right knee and tore it all up. She had to have multiple surgeries and realized that it would no longer be viable after her healing process to work with these animals. And so she chuckles at herself when she tells the story. She said, I really did require life to kick me out of the old and into the new. And now she has gone into stand-up comedy, and she's doing quite well. The pandemic has kind of gotten in the way of some of her performing, but she's been an opener for a lot of very well-known acts. And I think she'll be one of those well-known acts in due time. Resisting. Do you require life to kick you out of the old and into the new? Here's some keys about change. Usually, change is birthing something. The universe just doesn't delight to just knock our well-ordered lives over in disarray. for its own kicks. Change is an aspect of the universe that allows for evolution and transformation. Life is always seeking to birth more of itself, to find ways to express more of its unlimited intelligence and livingness. That's the agenda of God at the heart of all creation and at the heart of you and me. So change is the mechanism whereby we don't get too stuck and we keep being challenged to grow, to become, and to express more of who we are designed to be. Now, it's natural to grieve change. Doesn't mean that changes are always easy. They're not. I know personally, the past year and a half was very difficult for me to shift out of an old identity and old practices, to let go of a ministry I deeply loved and had done a lot with. And yet, when God says go, it's best we go. It's best we go. I had to grieve. I had to be willing and honest enough with myself to grieve it. And when we lose, change comes along and we lose loved ones, or we lose pets or something like that, we need to do healthy grieving. Because you see, we grieve because we first loved. And so it's a precious thing to grieve. And yet love would also have us not only honor the grieving, but also move on in life, to continue living and giving and growing. So understand this, change is a sacred mechanism of spirit for newness. And another thing is that change is essential for our own awakening and our own evolution. Somebody has said that change is a mask that transformation wears. And so it's also about our becoming more and more in this life. And it takes a great amount of skill to be in the very midst of the whirlwind of your changes and carry the awareness that something's coming forth here. Something's being birthed. In some webinars I've been doing, the question seems to come up about these painful times and all the change and the disruption, the upheaval that's going on. And many people grieve that. And I think what's important is to understand that it's uncomfortable. Usually crisis and chaos precede transformation, precede productive change. So we have to have strong spiritual roots, deep spiritual roots, so that when the winds of change blow, we're not toppled over. It may not be uncomfortable, and we may feel like we're bending in the winds of change, but we're not breaking. And so the real gift is in the midst of change, the midst of upheaval or loss, to remind ourselves, something's seeking to come forth here. Something bigger, something better, something next for me is being offered. And what I know is that though there have been difficult times for Unity Church of the Hills, I know the quality of your ministry. And I know that if we can accept the changes, we can move forward to create ever greater newness, ever greater good. You know, that little acorn has the pattern within it of its oak. The oak that is within it is always within every phase of that acorn. When it's just that seed, when it breaks open and sprouts, when it's a seedling and a yearling and on, it always has the higher pattern within it. And it gives itself to fulfilling more and more of that. Well, there is a deep and rich, powerful pattern at the heart of Unity Church of the Hills. That's why I have such an affection and respect for you and for the ministry that you've all co-created. It's a beautiful thing. It's sweet. The world needs it. The people of Austin and beyond need it. And so we too get to stand in the midst of change and be open to what can be. Be open to the great oak at the heart of Unity Church of the Hills. Be open to that. Never forget that it's there. Just as in your life, your potential is already here, more than you could ever know. You don't have enough lifetimes to fulfill all of the changes within you. And by the way, you have an unlimited amount of lifetimes, in my humble opinion. And so we will always be questing to fulfill more of God's pattern, the perfect pattern within us. Remember that that's true for Unity Church of the Hills. It is a beautiful, powerful ministry with so much more yet to be expressed. And another key about change is that in the midst of change, let us always remember that the universe is always conspiring for our highest and best. You might want to just write that down. The universe is always conspiring for my highest and best. I'll say it again. The universe is always conspiring for my highest and best. So you see, the universe is on your team. Okay? It is on your team. It is seeking to forward you. And all of the resources and the ways and means are already provided. Our job is to be willing to flow and grow so that these resources, these ways and means can flow to and through us and be presented on our life path. The universe loves you. It doesn't give up on you, and it's not judging you. It's always conspiring for your highest and best. It's always conspiring for the conditions to emerge in your life whereby you can shine, whereby you can reveal more and more of your God-given greatness and your infinite potential. Know that about yourself. The universe is always conspiring for my highest and best. So a bridge to breakthrough begins by accepting change, accepting it. I think some of the most masterful people on the planet are the ones that welcome and actually run to change rather than having to have the rug pulled out from under them or getting kicked in the knee or whatever the case may be. Changes, again, aren't always easy, but if we'll face them, we can make it through. You know, I was reading the other day that on the prairies where cattle are raised in the Midwest and the West, interesting things happen. Occasionally blizzards, terrible blizzards come rolling through. And the cattle sometimes don't survive. In fact, many of the cattle, they just try to walk away from the storm, but they eventually come up against a fence line or something like that, and they get stuck, and they just stay there. And facing away from the storm, the snows blow over them and pile over them and cover them, and they freeze to death. However, a specific breed of cattle, the Hereford, they instinctively know not to do this. And instead, what the Hereford do is they face into the storm and they walk into the storm. And that may not be the most comfortable thing to do, but it ensures their survival because they don't get piled over with that snow. And so I think that has a lesson for you and me. When things get difficult, running away may not be the best strategy. Pretending, clinging, resisting may not serve us. The fearful little ego in us is tempted to just go down those paths. And yet the courageous spirit in us calls us to face into the storm and accept the change. Look right at it and accept it. Mark Nepo, a wonderful poet and a friend of mine, he writes, "As a frightened man in a burning boat has only one way to the rest of his life, we must move with courage through the wall of flame into the greater sea." I think that's a partner virtue with accepting change, and that is courage. The courage to face and to embrace change. So this is the first time I'm going to pause here and ask you to make a few notes to yourself. A few notes. And this isn't when you don't put these into the chat. That'll be later. I'll tell you when to do that. But just in your own journal or on your own paper, I invite you to write a few reflections to this opening here. Some changes I must face and embrace in my life. A few notes to yourself about changes that need to be faced and embraced. And then in the life of Unity Church of the Hills. Okay. So I'm going to put on just a little background music, and for maybe 3 minutes or so, I just invite you to make a few notes about the changes it's time to face and embrace in both of these areas. And then I'll be back with you and we'll go into the next step. Jotting down a few reflections about the changes staring at you, the changes that have been unfolding for Unity Church of the Hills, changes to face and embrace. About another minute before we continue. All right. So very powerful to end our pretending and clinging and resisting and accept change. That's the first plank in A Bridge to Breakthrough. Let's start now with the second step, the second stage or plank on a bridge into breakthrough, honoring feelings. Honoring feelings. Now, most people feel just about as suspicious and unsettled about feelings as they do about change. Yet as we begin the bridging by accepting change, it's essential to acknowledge and work creatively with the whole range of our feelings. If we don't, we end up sabotaging our journey forward. Now, here are some key points about feelings so that we're clear. First of all, feelings are a natural part of our human experience. They're natural. All right. It's important to come to grips with how we feel about everything, and also how it is that we numb, get into traditions of numbing our feelings. It's very important. Look at children. Children are amazing. They feel greatly. They feel spontaneously. They exude it all: joy, laughter, curiosity, love and caring, sadness, pain. Oh man, they're just there with all of it. And somehow we think that becoming adults is about numbing all of that. Well, maybe we got it really wrong in that regard. But children, they play full out. They play greatly in life, and inevitably, from time to time, they get hurt. And they feel it intensely. They don't hide it. They express anger and lots of tears. Then they run and go find someone to get some nurturing. And usually they want a treat, a sympathy treat. And then the owie is kissed or their hair is stroked, and then they go right back out and play. And usually with the very same kids where they got hurt. You see, they got it right. Kids know the path of healing. They flow down that path easily, and they return to the dance of their lives. But then at some point in life, we decide it's unsafe. As we grow up, it's unsafe to either experience or share our feelings. So that's the first thing. They're natural. Secondly, there's a difference between feelings and emotional content. All right? Feelings, I hold to be fresh, spontaneous, authentic responses to the many facets of life, the difficult and painful, as well as the precious and beautiful. So they're fresh, spontaneous, authentic responses to the whole panorama of life. Those are feelings. We all have them, and we deserve them. And life is kind of sterile and hollow without them, quite frankly. Now, emotional content, emotions are most often old, stored up, unhealed energies and hurts. And for many, their emotional field is like a toxic pressure cooker and filled with stuff, filled with a lot of pain from the past. Eckhart Tolle calls this the pain body. And so many people are afflicted by the toxins of their unresolved pain body because feelings were stuffed. And then they became toxic. They devolved into this toxic emotional field. And so when we refuse to deal with feelings honestly and honorably, then the new life that we might be attempting to build, it just becomes a pain-filled version of the old life. And then we're anger and upset waiting to happen. Because we've got this pressure cooker. And by golly, we got a button and somebody's going to push our buttons. And we're upset and anger waiting to happen. Somebody pushed your buttons lately? Well, as far as I'm aware, the purpose of a button is to be pushed. Yeah, that's the purpose of a button. You've got a button, it was out there to be pushed. Why are you surprised or upset that it was pushed? And by the way, who installed the button? So you see, it's important to deal honorably with what we're feeling so that it's not lodged within us. And in my meditation work, what I encourage people to do when feelings come up, emotional material from the past, Don't push it down. Don't judge it as awful. Don't try to do a spiritual bypass around it, which is just another way to pretend that they're not there, but they are. Let the energy come up and face it, be with it. But just be with the sensation. Don't dive back into the story. Don't get back into the anger about who did what to whom and the story about this and just amp that up. No, just be with the sensation. It's about the sensation, not the story. Be with the sensation. Don't push it down. Just be with it. And the more you let it be there, the more it dissipates and dissolves. And then you're not filled with that anymore. You're not carrying that burden so much anymore. So then you can stay on top of your feelings rather than stuffing them and then having to experience them come up as distorted emotions later on. All right? You can deal honorably with your feelings. Now, a third key about feelings is that all feelings and emotions arise either from love or fear. And our anger and our pain, they all emerge out of our fears. We're angry and we hurt because, bottom line, we're afraid in some way or another. We're afraid, okay? And when we know this then, when we know that at the bottom of all this stuff we often carry is fear, we can open our hearts. We can enter into the holy practice of letting the sensation come up, just being with it, keep breathing, being with that sensation. Don't go down the line of the story. Just be with the sensation. And then we can open our hearts and let love heal and grow us. In the Bible, it says perfect love casts out fear. But first of all, we have to admit that the fear's there. And the pain and the hurt that the fear sponsored, that it's all there. We just be with that energy, with the sensation. Just keep breathing and let the sensation play itself out. Don't get into the story. And you'll find that then you can move on. There's a partner virtue with honoring feelings, and it is honesty. Such an important virtue. It's a magical key for bridging, is to be honest and not try to con ourselves or others, but to be honest. And so the healing path is to honestly feel our feelings and then guide ourselves back to love. But we have to feel the feelings first. Or maybe the love is artificial and just a way we pretend again. So this is what deepens us, you see, and it frees us, it empowers us to create a deliberate and a genuine newness. During our season for nonviolence in, I believe, 1999, I met a man that I've stayed in touch with for a long time. His name is Azim Khamisa. Azim Khamisa. His story is such a riveting one. In 1995, his son Tariq was delivering pizza as a way to make money while being in college. And he was sent on a delivery to what later turned out to be a gang house in the San Diego area. Without realizing it, the members of this gang had commissioned a 14-year-old initiate that if he was going to get into the gang, he had to shoot somebody. And so when Tariq arrived to deliver the pizza, the kid, this 14-year-old, said, "I'm not paying for that pizza. Just give it to me and get out of here." And Tariq, he didn't want anything to do with that. He'd have to pay for it. The 14-year-old pulled a gun and shot him, killed him. Well, Azim worshiped his son and was grief-stricken to a degree we can only imagine. And he got angry, ragefully angry and bitter toward not only the boy who shot him, but even to our country, that with so much violence going on in our country. Well, in his Muslim faith, Azim was commissioned to feel his grief entirely. In fact, one of their traditions is that when a child precedes a parent in death, the parent jumps into the grave and receives the body of the child and lays it to rest. Azim did that, but then he didn't want to get out of the grave. He was so grief-stricken. He said, "Just put the dirt in on top of me too." Well, they pulled him out. And also, another aspect of that tradition is that you are to grieve for 40 days, but not more. At the expiration of that 40 days, you must come to a kind of resolution. Now, I don't think that they are trying to say that you never feel any more pain about it, but you enter into a dynamic time of grieving that has a beginning and an ending. And in their tradition, it's a 40-day expiration date for this, the major thrust of the grief and the bitterness. And so Azim arrived at that time, and it was a very difficult thing for him. But he knew he had to do that, because in his tradition is that if you hold on to that bitterness and that surface level of grief, you actually prevent the departed soul from going further on its journey. And he didn't want to do that. So he reached that date and he purposely began to practice shifting his awareness off the bitterness and the pain, and he opened to God's next steps for him. Took a lot of rigorous practice, and there are times he said he didn't do all that well, but eventually he made it work. And over the course of about a year, he found himself able to totally embrace peace and freedom. Though I'm sure to this very day, there are elements of grieving. But he entered into a place of peace and freedom. And it was then that he could bring himself to actually go to the prison and meet with that 14-year-old boy, who is now older, and forgive him. And then, having moved back into love, he was also able to partner with the shooter's grandfather, Ples Felix, in creating a foundation to teach forgiveness, named in honor of his son, Tariq Kamisa. And to this day, Azim plans, when the boy that shot his son is released from prison, he plans to involve him in the foundation to teach forgiveness and healing. If Azim can do it, you and I can do it. You know, there's a Chinese proverb: you cannot prevent the birds of sorrow from flying over your head, but you can prevent them from building nests in your hair. Let's not have the nests of the birds of sorrow going on. A husband and a wife had been married for many years, and they'd planned a wonderful time when he retired. And he finally got to that date and he retired, and about a month later, he fell over dead. The wife was devastated. They had such an ongoing love affair and had so many plans. And she was so devastated that on her husband's gravestone, she had the words etched in: "The light of my life has gone out." The light of my life has gone out. But then she discovered our New Thought teachings, and she dived into them. And even though she was in the throes of her grief, there was a light that was coming on for her. And several years later, in attending one of our New Thought centers, she met a wonderful man. And at first she struggled with it, but then she let herself have a relationship with the man. And they became very happy. And she married him. But then she was very troubled about what she had inscribed on that gravestone. And she thought of just getting a brand new one for her former husband. But then she had an idea. And she had a guy go out there and have a new sentence inscribed under: "The light of my life has gone out." She had etched in, "I struck another match." I struck another match. Life isn't always easy, but we have to honor our feelings. Let a healing process happen. Open our hearts again and strike another match. Kindle another light in our life. So I want to have you pause now and consider this, beloved ones. Make a few notes. And again, this isn't the time to put it into the chat yet. We'll do that in a little while. But in your journal, make a few notes. Okay, and let me see if I can get this up here. All right. In terms of honoring feelings, feelings I'm honoring about the changes in my life, and feelings I'm honoring about the changes in the life of Unity Church of the Hills. Just be with that. And if any energy, emotional or feeling energy comes up, again, just bless it, be with it. You don't have to carry it anymore. Just be with it. Don't go into the story. Just be with that energy and let it unfold. Let it dissipate from you. And make some notes to yourself, because sometimes we have to continue to do this as we go forward. Continue to allow that to come up until it no longer is there for you in honesty and in truth. So write some bullet points, feelings that you're now ready to honor about the changes in your own life and in the life of Unity Church of the Hills. And again, a little music. And so for 3 or 4 minutes, we'll make a few notes. We're making a few notes with great honesty about feelings. Feelings that you're honoring about the changes you're experiencing and the changes in the life of Unity Church of the Hills. We'll take about another minute. All right. Good work. Good work. It's not always easy, but it's very powerful. And again, just let the sensations come up, be with them, breathe through them, don't get into the story. And eventually, that's no longer material that's lodged in your life. And thank you for your honesty. So these first 2 steps, accepting change and honoring feelings, they inevitably lead us to the 3rd stage or 3rd plank in our bridge to breakthrough. embracing transformation. Embracing transformation. Now, this too is often considered very dangerous, nonsensical, because most are resisting change and they're solidifying their security and they're avoiding endings. But there cannot be breakthroughs and newness without endings. Think of the metamorphosis of a caterpillar. That caterpillar hears a call to yield to something greater than it knows, and it affixes itself to that leaf and spins a cocoon around it. And then we're told that a new kind of cells start happening in the caterpillar called imaginal cells. And these imaginal cells hold the template for the higher organism. They've got the pattern in it. But the immune system of the caterpillar immediately goes to war with these imaginal cells. But the imaginal cells bond together rather than get dissipated. They bond together, they share information, and eventually the caterpillar arrives at a state that scientists call critical unworkability. It has to yield. And so this is a momentous step. The caterpillar dissolves into a fluid. And now the imaginal cells have full reign to be the master programmers and to create the new organism. So you see, even at the level of nature, there comes a time to surrender and to bond together, to hold a vision. And this is what I pray we're doing for our beloved Unity Church of the Hills, is that we're dealing with anything in the way so that we can come together and share information in these challenging times, so that we can allow the higher pattern of this wondrous ministry to come forth in greater expression in the days and months to come. And I pray that for you too, that there comes a time when you accepted the ending and you're honest with your feelings, that you say, okay, life, I'm ready to be transformed. I'm ready for my own personal metamorphosis. And I know that a key to this is surrendering. Surrendering. I'm not going to fight the changes anymore. I'm going to stop denying the feelings, the sadness, the pain, the fear. I'm going to dissolve. I'm going to let go to a greater possibility. I'm going to surrender to an evolutionary thrust that the universe is always conspiring for my highest and best. I'm letting go into a spirit-led transformation, as I did last March 9th of 2019. I was spirit-led to make an enormous change in my life. And now I've come through that. And after about a year of decompressing and grieving and all of that, the new creativity started going. And now I'm doing webinars and consulting and personal counseling and consultations. And I really love the new work that I'm doing. But I had to surrender. It's time to embrace transformation through the virtue of surrendering. In New Thought, there is a phrase, the upper progressive movement of the spirit. And I love that phrase. In this reality, there is the upper progressive movement of the spirit. And that too is another way that in our teachings, we talk about the evolutionary thrust that's nudging us to our greater yet to be. The upper progressive movement of the spirit is at work in you, in your Christ nature, in your spiritual essence. And our ego self, our worldly self, fights the upper progressive movement of the spirit. It fights it, especially in challenging times, in change times. But this upper progressive movement of the spirit can become the catalyst, the spiritual catalyst for these very times to be times of growth and becoming rather than just breakdown. So this spirit-led surrender, this total willingness to let go, to cooperate, to be open and vulnerable and teachable. This all allows the alchemy of change or difficulty to move us into transformation. Now, surrendering is not weakness. No, it's actually an expression of the greatest truth, because our surrendering is also relying. It's a relying on something greater to grow us, this upper progressive movement of the spirit. Now, again, in the face of it, the usual approach is to resist change, cling to our attachments to people and to things and to situations and to our agendas and our expectations, to stay stuck in our old stories and our limiting conclusions about our lives, our negative self-concepts. We stay stuck in all of that and resist the upper progressive movement of the spirit. Now, this has a psychological basis in the structure of our brains. The primitive limbic brain, it emerged in human beings about 200,000 years ago. And this part of our brain is concerned with physical and emotional survival. And it sees the world as predatory, hates change. This part of the brain is what reminds us of our failures whenever we're getting out on the skinny branches and maybe going for something great, taking a risk. It tells us we need to stay safe. It's the brain of our belief systems and emotions. It twists things to justify our limitations. And this part of the brain is anchored in a worldview of separation and alienation and lots of threats. Now, the neocortex, the new brain it's called, it emerged about 50,000 years ago. And it's the arena of transcendent states. It's that part of our brain that wants to flow into innovation and breakthrough creativity. It's what brings higher states of transcendence, of oneness, of connecting and collaborating. And it is the part of the brain that's the foundation for art and science, democracy, and mysticism. Now, here's the challenge. Whenever we're shocked or whenever the unexpected comes along, we are usually dominated by the primitive instinctual brain. It's our default programming, and we just tend to go there, especially when change and new experiences occur. And those new experiences, those new changes usually then get linked by the old brain to past hurts and past wounds. Because they just trigger the old neural networks, you see. And so this tends to go on without us asking it to or thinking it will. It's just the way it works. Unless and until we decide to shift and activate the neocortex, the new brain, the higher consciousness. And by the way, the brain is not consciousness. Consciousness is reality, and it uses the brain like you, the person, use a computer. Your brain is like a computer. So what we get to do is shift into a higher consciousness that we live, move, and have our being in God, in love, in infinite possibility. And when change comes along, it's not a threat, it's an opportunity for breakthrough creativity, for innovation, for connecting rather than dividing. And as we shift into that consciousness, we actually activate that part of the brain, and it can move through our bodies, and it handles a lot of the stress and the shutdown that occurs. So we have this understanding, you see. You can use a clear intention and a clear awareness to kickstart the higher brain into this path of breakthrough and transformation. So I think that the key in terms of embracing transformation is surrendering to the heart. In the face of whatever upsets us, remembering that we can surrender to the heart and activate higher consciousness and a higher part of our brain structure. Jack Kornfield, the great author Jack Kornfield, a great Buddhist author, he writes about a lieutenant who was in line at a grocery store, a very crowded grocery store, and he was in a hurry. And as a lieutenant, he liked everything run by the rules, working efficiently. And he was in this long line, going up to the cash register, and ahead of him was an older lady with a baby, and she had only one item to purchase. And he gets all upset within himself. He says, doesn't she know there's an express line? She's going to hold up this whole line. She's going to hold up everything. Now, when this older lady reached the register, the people around her began cooing and playing with the baby. And this further stressed and frustrated the lieutenant. And all of a sudden, the older lady handed the baby to the clerk behind the cash register. And that clerk held and played with that baby for what must have been 5 minutes. And he was just about to come out of his skin. He was so frustrated. So when he finally got up to the register, he shared all of that. And he said, how that lady had only one item. And you took the baby. Why did you hold and play with that baby for so long? And then the clerk said to him, well, sir, I'm so sorry, but my husband was also in the armed services. He was killed in Afghanistan. So now I have to work full time. That lady is my mom, and she brings my baby to me once a day when I'm working so that I can hug him and give him my love. The lieutenant was ushered into the new brain. He surrendered the judgments and the anger, and he experienced a transformation. Now we can do this too. It's time to embrace transformation, and it's time to pause for another reflection. Now this time, this is the first of 3 times when I'm going to invite you to actually type your thoughts into the chat. And right at the bottom of your Zoom screen, just click on chat and you can type your thoughts into that. And this will get recorded and then relayed to your board of trustees, your fellow members who are lovingly seeking to guide your spiritual community. And I remind you that what you put in there will not be seen by the rest of the audience who are a part of this webinar, but they will get recorded and go directly to the board, who will hold them in confidence, but they're very interested in your thoughts, your ideas, so that they can respond creatively and lovingly back to you. So here's how I'd like us to respond to this. All right. So the next stage is embracing transformation. And I'd like you to reflect and input emotions or judgments about the changes at Unity Church of the Hills that I'm now willing to surrender. Emotions or judgments about the changes at Unity Church of the Hills that I'm now willing to surrender. Having accepted the changes, honoring the feelings, now here's the material that I want to share with you that I'm now willing to surrender. So as I put on some music in a moment, just click the chat button and then just start typing in whatever it is you want to share with your members and friends on the Board of Trustees. And we thank you in advance for your honesty as well as your intention to surrender. Typing into the chat any of the emotions or judgments about the changes your spiritual community has experienced that you're realizing and are now willing to surrender. Thank you so much for your honest sharing. Now, to allow you to continue to share, it's so very valuable. We're also going to take about a 5-minute break, all right? An opportunity to stretch, and then we'll continue with the second half of the bridge, the fourth, fifth, and sixth stages and planks in the bridge. So we'll reconvene at about 2:22. And so continue to chat and take a little stretch. begin again in just a few moments. If you can return, please. Well, once again, I thank you for your generosity and your honesty, and I'm sure this will be very useful to the Board of Trustees. You'll have several other opportunities to share as well. So we take a deep breath and we prepare to enter into the fourth stage and learn about the fourth plank in A Bridge to Breakthrough, and it is re-entering the game. Re-entering the game. Now, this is also not an easy part of this. The healing has progressed when one has continued to do the first three steps, yet it's so tempting to distort the new by dragging the old back into it. Okay, and having experienced pain, we fear new pain. Having weathered change, we resist new changes. Having grieved, we fear to open our hearts again. And having lost the familiar, we fear the bold and the unexplored. Now, this kind of a syndrome is a very common pattern: to hold back, to withdraw, to place a definite limit on the genuine energy that we're willing to bring, or that we'll commit, a definite limit on how much of ourselves we'll contribute. And so you see, it's another attempt at protecting ourselves, to hold back. And yet it stifles us. It stifles. So with the change weathered and the grief expressed or progressing, it has the potential then to lead us into new life. Yet the question is, how available will I make myself? How really, genuinely available am I to the new? This is a critical point. There comes a time when we have to give ourselves back to life, to newness. For years, I've loved a story about a guy named Roy Riegels. He played football, college football, for the UC, University of California, Berkeley Bears. And he was an All-American and a team captain. Well, in the 1929 Rose Bowl, one of the biggest college games of any year, the Bears were playing against Georgia Tech, and Riegels was playing defense, and there was a fumble. The other team fumbled. Riegels picked up the fumble and ran the wrong way and scored a touchdown for the other team. A nightmare. At halftime, in the locker room, Roy Riegels was disconsolate. He was dejected. He was crying. And he told his coach, I can't go out for the second half. I just can't face the crowd. The name of his coach was Nibs Price. Nibs Price. And so Price talked to him about admitting his mistake, and that everyone has those moments. Have you had a reverse touchdown moment? I sure have. I definitely have. We can either shirk from life, or we can lean into them and rise above them. Coach Nibs grabbed Roy Riegels by the shoulders and stood him up, looked into his eyes, and he declared, "Get up, go back, and play. The game isn't over yet." I love that statement. Get up, go back, and play. The game isn't over yet. Well, I tell you, he got through to Roy Riegels. He got through to him, and Riegels went out and played as a man possessed. Nobody had ever seen him play with the intensity and the accuracy and the power that he did, and he led his teammates to a powerful and wonderful victory. Get up, go back and play. The game isn't over yet. I say that to you. If you've been hiding out, cowering, holding back. Things have changed. It's hurt in your life. And you're beginning to put your toe into the pool of transformation. There's going to be a time when you got to get up, go back and play. Like kids play. And even when they get hurt for a time, get up, go back and play. Because the game of your life isn't over. The book of your life is not finished being written. Robert Frost said, in 3 words, I can summarize everything I've learned about life. It goes on. It does. And hopefully we go on with it and we flow with it. As it says in the Bible, behold, I make all things new. And it says, I will restore to you the years the locusts have eaten. And in the great 23rd Psalm, he restoreth my soul. There's a restorative, a rejuvenative energy in life if we're willing to get back in the game and play. Albert Schweitzer, he said, you should realize that your soul suffers if you live superficially. How true, how true. Now there's a key companion virtue for re-entering the game. And that companion virtue is a committed heart. A committed heart. We eventually get the message that our lives aren't meant to be fear-based, but love-based. And as I did early in my life, I learned to open my heart, and I'll tell you more about that in the next plank that we put down on the bridge. So we learn that we can open our hearts and access an energy that is unparalleled in this life. I've been doing spiritual work on myself and with others for many, many years. And what I know is we have the gift for transformation and renewal right here in our hearts. The thing that's often in question, though, is our commitment to that. Are we committed to the ego and its fear structure, or to the spirit, the Christ self, and our hearts, our hearts? I want to share with you an experience written about by a wonderful psychotherapist and MD named Rachel Naomi Remen. She writes about a young man who'd been separated from his ski party, and he spent 3 days in below zero weather, and somehow he managed to survive. But he was experiencing a lot of frostbite and progressive gangrene, especially on his feet. And one of his foot was especially afflicted, and the surgeons wanted to amputate. The left foot was improving, but not the right. But the young man flatly refused the amputation. And gradually he got sicker and sicker as the toxins from his foot flooded into his body. And his family and his friends, they became desperate. And they pleaded with him to allow the surgery, the amputation, but he refused over and over again. Well, the whole issue came to a head when his fiancée, who was overwhelmed with the possibility of losing her beloved, began weeping. And at one point, she tore off the engagement ring from her finger and thrust it onto the swollen little toe of his right foot. And she sobbed and she yelled at him, I hate this foot. If you want this foot so much, why don't you marry it? You're going to have to choose. You can't have us both. Well, the next day he scheduled the surgery. Seeing that diamond on his toe shocked him, and her dramatic act helped him see that he was more attached to keeping his foot than he was committed to his life, their life. And Dr. Remen writes, while attachment has its source in the personality, commitment comes from the soul. Attachment closes down options. Commitment opens them up. Modern life has made us people of attachment rather than people of commitment. Attachment is a reflex, an automatic response which often may not reflect our deepest good. Commitment is a conscious choice to align ourselves with our most genuine values and sense of purpose. And that's why I offer that the greatest way to re-enter the game of life is to tap your committed heart, to bring forth a committed heart and let it carry you forward. So with this fourth plank in our awareness now, I'm going to invite you to again type into the chat your responses. And again, these are confidential and will be seen only by the board, but your responses to this bit of reflection. Oh, and by the way, remember the love offering. I forgot to pull this slide up. Just remind you, as you have received, so give. And just make sure you've noted how to text a love offering into our wonderful church here. Just text to UCOH love to 77977. Okay, got that? All right. So this fourth stage is re-entering the game, and I invite you to type into the chat your thoughts and ideas about the ways I'm willing to bring a committed heart to UCOH, to Unity Church of the Hills. What ways are you willing to bring a committed heart to this precious and wonderful ministry? We'll take about 3 minutes, and thank you again for typing these into the chat and for your open sharing. Thank you for typing in your response to the ways you're willing to bring a committed heart to Unity Church of the Hills. Type it into the chat. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for your open and generous sharing. It is such a great gift. So now we're ready for the fifth stage, the fifth plank in our bridge into breakthrough territory. And it is receiving the gifts. Receiving the gifts. Now, this part of our bridging is an important step of recognizing that every experience offers us gifts. The problem is we're not always willing to receive those gifts. Ernest Holmes wrote, "A bucket that is turned upside down, even in a cloudburst, will not fill with water." The great challenge and opportunity is to turn over the bucket of our awareness and to shift our relationship with key life experiences so that we can receive the universe's cascade of gifts in everything. And again, remembering that the universe is conspiring for our highest and our best, even in the darkest, even the most difficult or the most embarrassing of times. Receiving the gifts moves us further into breakthrough territory. There are gifts in everything, even in the awkward, embarrassing experiences. Oh my God, I've had plenty of them myself. I'm remembering a time fairly early in my ministry. I was an associate minister at Mile High Church, and this had to be in the 90s. And I was doing so many weddings almost every Saturday. I'd do sometimes 3 or 4 weddings a day. And I didn't have to do all the Sunday messages, thankfully. So I spent a good part of my Saturdays on these weddings. And I remember one Saturday, I was going to my 4th wedding. I had been in the 3rd wedding in the mountains of Colorado, outside of Denver, and I had to speed down to Arvada, which is a suburb of Denver, to do the 4th and final wedding of that day. And I got there like 15 minutes ahead of time, and I could see that the mother of the bride was not pleased that I hadn't been there much earlier. But at any rate, I connected with the bride and the groom, and we reminded ourselves of how things were going to unfold. It was a backyard wedding, and had this huge tent set up and chairs and everything. And so we're in the middle of the wedding, and I get to the vows section, and I turned to the groom and I said, "Will you, Mark, give yourself to this woman?" And immediately there was this chill in the room, and I could see the shock on his face and on the bride's. And then I realized, oh my God, I just called him by the first name of the groom of the previous wedding. And I then corrected myself, "Will you, Jerry, give yourself?" And there's a little bit of chuckle, and we went on, but I noticed the mother of the bride was glaring at me. Just darts coming out of her eyes, lacerating me. Just, I could tell, obviously angry. So we completed the wedding and we went inside. Just the bridegroom and maid of honor and best man went inside to sign the license. And then they would have their reception under that tent. And so we're signing the license. I said, "I'm so sorry. I called you by the groom in my previous wedding. I'm very, very sorry. And I think your mom," I said this to the bride, "I think your mom is real upset." And she giggled. And she said, "Well, yeah, she is, because you see, the name you used from my new husband here, that was the first name of my ex-husband." Oh, whoa. Well, I tell you what, got that license signed and I got out of there as fast as I could. I was not going to let the mother of the bride get back at me. But you know what? I've been around the block so many times now. I look back at that. At first I felt guilty and like, oh my God. But I just chuckle and think, you put yourself out there in life, things happen. And now, I just think it's a gift. It was a gift. Then the gift was to be able to laugh at myself and not continue to be this perfectionist. You see, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And experiences like that, their gift is to help perfectionists stay in recovery. And I did. But what about the heartbreaking, the devastating experiences? What gifts in those, really? Now, we've all had that kind of experiences, especially as the force of change asserts itself in our lives. And I guess we get to choose whether those kinds of very extreme changes, devastating experiences become quicksand, dead end experiences, or are there gifts in them as well? And again, going back into the annals of my own life, and I write about this in the early part of my book, one of the most devastating and painful experiences of my life, my early life, became one of the greatest gifts of my life. In my early 30s, I'd been a minister for 3 years in Portland, Oregon, in my first little church, and I'd grown that. And my predecessor and mentor, Dr. Fred Vogt, invited me to be his associate minister at Mile High Church, and I said yes. And soon after arriving back at Mile High, I met and fell in love with a gorgeous woman, and we were together for 3 years. And we had planned on marrying. In fact, we were going to announce our engagement after the holidays in year 3. And she went off to have the holidays with a half sister, and when I in Ohio, and when I picked her up after her visit to her half sister, she seemed distant, and I thought, well, she's just exhausted. Well, 2 days later, I came to my home and I found a note from her. Everything of hers that had been in my home was gone, and she said, "Our relationship is over. Don't contact me." At first, I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke. I called her mom, and I figured that she had no other place to live, so she was probably back with her mom. And her mom says, "Yeah, she's done that, and she won't tell me why. But what I know, Roger, is she means it, and so you're going to have to find a way to let this go." Oh, I was devastated. I ached at every level of my being. I grieved. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't sleep. I wasn't eating. And things got a little better in the weeks that passed, but my creativity was shot, and my hurt began to be anger. I would speak angrily of her, and then I even ventured that I hated her. And thank God I didn't marry a crazy woman, and things were getting pretty sad for me. I put on a look good image to the congregation, but I was suffering, and I wasn't sleeping well, wasn't eating. My creativity was gone. I was really in danger at a number of levels, especially my career, but also my body and my well-being. Then a friend said one night, as we were having a beer together and I was complaining yet again about this lady, he looked at me and said, "You teach these transformational principles. Have you ever thought of using them?" I wanted to deck my friend. I just wanted to knock him right off that bar stool. "You don't know how I'm feeling. I mean, you haven't gone through this." And he said, "I know." I said, "But Roger, I love you, and I know what you're doing to yourself, and you're going to have to look at this in some new ways, or you're going to just mess up your life and regret it so much." And as much as I resented him in the moment, I knew he was right. He was right. And I started looking more objectively at that, started talking to some people. And there's always help for us whenever we really want it, And the first thing I realized was I was deluding myself about the real quality of the relationship. I loved her and she loved me, but we weren't the kind of soulmates to go the distance. And we were there to really teach ourselves some lessons together. We were angels for each other, but in a different way. But the more I kept questing to know a picture bigger than what she did to me, being the victim, I wanted to go beyond victim and beyond hate. The more I realized that the gift this was bringing me was that I had gotten to my early 30s with a closed and protected heart. I was a loving enough person, but people couldn't get too close to me. They couldn't get intimate with me. And I had set up this incredible relationship experience to bring me to that realization. When I got that, the light bulbs were going on, and I was determined to find a way to enter into transformation. I began to work with a number of people, most notably Brew Joy, the late Brew Joy. And it was in his work, a 2-week intensive seminar, that my heart burst open. And I experienced it, gang. I experienced unconditional love. I experienced God as love. And I always had a sense of God as love, but now I had the full out experience of that pouring out of my heart. it was the most phenomenal experience. To this day, I love that moment. And I have made my vision statement for my life from that point on heart-centered living. And every day I do heart-opening work. And I've got that in my book as well, heart-opening exercises. And so that shifted everything in my life. My ministry took off. I eventually attracted Erica, my wife, into my life, was able to adopt her natural boys at an early age and make them my own. And now I've got 5 grandkids. I've got people everywhere that I love. I know what it's like to live with an open heart. So my time of agonizing shock and pain delivered to me the greatest gift of this lifetime. So if that can happen for me, it can happen for you. So if there's an area in your life where there's still a wound, and it's an open wound, do all of the steps of this bridge building, but explore the gift beyond victimhood, the gift beyond who did what to me. Explore the gift, the soul gift, the soul lesson that is always available in life. There's a gift in every experience for you and me, if we're willing to explore openly. Bernie Siegel, a very spiritually inclined doctor, writes, instead of judging the events in our lives as good or bad, right or wrong, we must recognize that of itself, nothing is good or bad, and everything has the potential to help us get back on the universe's schedule. This does not mean that we have to like what happens, but simply that we must remain open to the uses, even of adversity. A crisis may serve as a redirection, or as I often describe it, a reset button that starts you up again. Now, I believe that a great companion virtue for receiving the gifts is gratitude for the pearls, the irritations, the injuries, the hurts in life that eventually can be precious. Gratitude for the pearls. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, he writes about a time when he and his wife were told that their 4-year-old son had a disease called progeria, which is the early aging disease, and that before their child was 10, his body would deteriorate to that of a person well into their 90s, that his hair would all be gone, and that he would shrivel up into a crippled little being. And they were shattered, of course. They didn't know how they could stand it, but they kept on in the journey. And later, in retrospect, Kushner writes that in going through that experience with their son, they were drawn into levels of loving and experiences that were more touching and powerful than anything that life could have presented them in any other way. The courage and the gratitude to receive the gifts, the pearls. And Helen Keller said, I thank God for my handicaps, for through them I have found myself, my work, and my God. The painful becoming the precious. So I invite you to grab your journals. You don't have to type these into the chat this time. There'll be one other time, at our final bridge for that, final plank. But just grab your journals, and I just invite you into a moment of reflection. And here's what we'll look at. The stage is receiving the gifts. And just make a few bulleted notes to yourself. The gifts from our past I am now ready to receive, or the gifts from my past or our past, that I'm now ready to receive. All right, and in about 3 minutes, we'll conclude and go on to the final plank in our bridge to breakthrough. All right. Thank you, as always. Thank you so very much for your willingness to engage in this whole process. Well, we have arrived at the final stage and the final plank. And I want to pause before going into this one and just share that obviously, and it may not be so obvious, the stages of grieving and going from change to breakthrough, from breakdown to breakthrough, aren't always linear. It's not always that you do one and you finish it and you do the other and you do the other and do the other. Although I'm presenting them that way, sometimes they swirl together. And usually the first three are ones that help us resolve and create a new relationship with what was. And then these final three, and we do them sometimes simultaneously, are part of recreation and rejuvenation. So just understand that as you work with these things in your own life, you will probably find that you return to a lot of these steps and that you do some of them simultaneously with them. All right. So the final stage to understand, the final plank in our bridge is casting a larger vision. It's time, as we near breakthrough territory, to cast a larger vision. Joyce Vissel writes, sometimes we are asked in our hearts to do something, and we have trouble understanding why. We have a choice. We can either skip that direction, or we can trust that the voice of our heart is a master designer of our life. You know, as we receive the gifts with a committed and an open heart, we realize that the highest designer for all of life and for your life and mine is the heart. And very often that's the fountain of new vision. That's where we get inspiration. It's from the heart. I mean, sometimes we figure some things out and get creative in our heads, but I tell you, the most powerful things are when a vision emerges from the heart. And the heart math people are doing such exciting work in their research. And the upshot is that they're telling the world that the most intelligent organ in a person is their heart. And we think it's the head, but the heart is far more intelligent. And the heart is precognitive. The heart knows certain things are going to happen about 20 seconds before they actually happen, and then sends a message to the head, and the head sends the message to the gut and to the rest of the body. And the heart, spiritually, is our portal to the field of pure potentiality. to the field of the divine, to the field of what we don't know. It's through the portal of the heart. The voice of the heart is the master designer of your life and mine. And we're not done. As I said earlier, the last chapter has not been written in your life by far. The book of your life is ever unfolding, and there's more for you, so much more. I love it in the Bible. It says, the one who has begun a good work in you shall complete it. The divine, which has inspired you, launched you, dreamt you up. No one of us created ourselves. God created you. The divine love intelligence created you, birthed you. And that one who has begun a good work in you, placed the God seed, the spirit seed within you, shall complete it. And so what we get to do is open our hearts to a greater vision. What would Spirit have me be and do now? We think about the life of Unity Church of the Hills. What would the Great Spirit want this church to become? Remember, this is God's church. You've got a board of trustees, some very beautiful people I've come to dearly love in my work with them. But it's not their church. It's your church. But even beyond that, it's God's church. And so we get to ask, what's seeking to come forth out of the love and the heart that is Unity Church of the Hills? I believe, quite frankly, that this church, your church, has the potential to be one of the most outstanding New Thought centers. You already are outstanding, but you have everything it takes to enter into the upper echelon of any spiritual center, and definitely of New Thought spiritual centers. There's that much potential and that much beauty there. And so I feel it. And that's why I'm excited to support you all in getting there. And having the joy of that experience, because everybody will benefit and everybody will prosper. Everybody will prosper. The one who has begun a good work in you shall complete it. The one who began a good work in Unity Church of the Hills shall continue to unfold it, continue to evolve it. Let me tell you about a woman named Tae-Yoon Kim. Tae-Yoon Kim. Maybe some of you have heard of her. As a young Korean girl in the 50s, she saw her uncles practicing martial arts. And she writes, "What I saw awakened a deep feeling in me. Their movements seemed mystical, beautiful, and exciting. I had to learn how to do that myself." Well, in claiming that, Tae-Yoon Kim was breaking a 5,000-year-old cultural tradition. Girls were to learn to cook and sew so that they could get married. Girls were forbidden to learn martial arts. But Tae-Yoon, she just kept pestering her uncles to teach her. Finally, to quiet her, they agreed, thinking she'd soon quit, but she didn't quit. She didn't give up. And to their surprise, she really progressed. Well, now all the family and the neighbors, they started applying enormous pressure to try to stop Tae-Yoon from doing this foolish thing. And she was even beaten at times and locked into her room. She was called a terrible daughter, a disgrace. One time her mother even cut off most of her hair to embarrass her into staying into the house and not going out to practice. But Tae-Yoon writes, "I was determined to break out of the box everyone was trying to keep me trapped in. I knew I had to be true to the burning desire deep within." And I pray you're getting in touch with the burning desire in you. Well, her family was at its wit's end. And so finally, they decided they were going to give her over to some monks. Just send her off to some monks. Well, the head monk visited their house and met with Tae-Yoon and said to her, "So what do you want to do when you grow up?" And she replied, "I want to become a teacher and help people." And the monk said, "A teacher? What can you possibly teach?" And she said, "I am going to be the first woman teaching martial arts." And then she writes, "Unlike every other person in my life, he did not scoff at me. Instead, he said, 'Look at me. Since girls were not allowed to look a monk in the eye, I thought he was crazy, but he looked directly into my eyes for a long time and then said the words I'd been waiting so long to hear. He said, "Yes, you will become a great teacher, and I will teach you." In that split second, Tayun writes, my life changed. And she went on to become a great grandmaster in martial arts, and she's written several books, and she's a teacher of personal development. She caught a vision, and luckily, she wouldn't let it go. You know, things come along in our lives, and we're tempted to sacrifice our vision, to give up, or to feel like life is just trying to put us in our place or test us or something like that. I believe that life loves a great vision. And sometimes we have to stay committed to it. Well, often we do. And we have to explore, and we have to be open to the ways and means. Will we get caught up in not knowing how? How will it ever be possible? Your job is to stay in the big what and the big why. Why something matters to you and what it is, your vision. Stay out of how. There's a spiritual machinery in this universe that can lead you to the ways and means of how. But that's not your job. Your job is to stay passionate about your vision and keep your heart open for guidance as to the right next steps to take. But many people get deflated when they say, I just don't know how it could ever be. Well, that's true. I don't know. I never knew how I'd get to where I got in the ministry. In fact, when I first started, I wouldn't have believed I'd do the things I've done in the ministry. But you know, when you love a vision, you just keep doing whatever you can do day by day, whatever you're guided to do day by day, but you stay passionate about the vision. It's trusting the path. Now, I know that it was a difficult time in the life of Unity Church of the Hills when the successors to Reverend Steve, when that didn't work out. But I tell you what I'm here to do is to help us cast a larger, passionate vision. Because that is over now. That chapter is over. And it's now time to write a new chapter. And it's going to be a great one. And it's about all of our hearts conspiring together to envision something beautiful, something in service to God and to people, to your community, to the world. How to fashion a brighter spiritual beacon of Unity Church of the Hills. So we're in this work today, not any longer dwelling in old chapters, but we're writing a new chapter. There's a piece of writing about that I'd like to share with you. It's entitled Chapters. Writers always have to know when a chapter is finished. Nothing can spoil a book more than the author's not knowing when to stop. We have chapters in our lives as well. And it is very important for us to recognize when the present one is finished so we can go on to the next. To wind up a chapter when we sense its completion, whatever the length may be, is crucial to our growth. Chapters come in endless varieties: vocation, personal relationships, schooling, philosophical ideas. I would add spiritual communities. We must train ourselves to recognize the right time to close out an old chapter, for we cannot wholeheartedly begin a new one until we do. Recognizing chapters is an art worth cultivating as we seek to express our souls on a higher level. So true. And I just bet you that a whole lot of you participating today, you're sensing that all of the upheavals and changes, maybe even some of the losses that you've experienced in recent months, have the opportunity for you to really write a new chapter. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, over a dozen people who have said, you know, I probably would have just kept perking along with the same old, same old. But when this came along and I lost my job, I finally got to let that job go. But I was too scared to let it go. So many times I've heard that. I would have just ridden that dead horse for as long as I could. But this kicked me out of that. And a lot of people I know are courageously looking at building a new dream, that they are interested in bringing forth the dream of a life that they would love even more than what they have had. I'm excited. I'm beginning some small group work with highly committed people. It's called Master Dream Building. And it's a 3-month program for the people who want to spend 3 months making sure they don't sabotage themselves and that they really do move down the path of a life they would really love. And I'm really excited about that because I know we can do this. But I also know we need support. Every one of us, we need support. If you're interested in this program, rogerteel.com is where you can find. Just click on Master Dream Building under seminars, seminar registration. But here's what I want you to know. A new chapter is waiting to flow out of your heart for you. And maybe it's not a wholesale letting go of the former chapter, but all our chapters build on one another. And so it may well be that you have opportunities now to enrich what's going on in your life right now to a higher level. Well, you know, it's time to cast a larger vision. Do you have a clear vision for your life, or is it just a fuzzy longing? I mean, a vision begins with longing, and it also begins by honoring our discontent as well. Sometimes we don't form our greater visions because we're hiding out and not accepting that we're not entirely contented with what's going on. So if we look at our discontent, then we can look at our longing. But we can't just leave it as this fuzzy longing. We have to begin to cast it into a vision, move it into a greater degree of clarity. And oftentimes that means we have to confront our fears. We have to confront the yeah buts that live within us. We often have to confront naysayers and transcend what naysayers around us are saying. Oh, you can't do that, or you'll never recover from that, or this isn't possible, or why would you upset the apple cart, and all of that. But again, it's about connecting with the heart and the passion of the heart and understanding that the more we revisit the heart and ask the deep questions about our vision, the more indeed we can get clear that life wants to show us the next level of our oakness out of the acorn of our being. It's kind of an awkward metaphor, but it's the best I could come up with in the moment. So I believe it's time to also embrace a new chapter for Unity Church of the Hills. And yeah, I know the COVID-19 situation is precluding us from meeting together. I had planned to come out and speak a couple of times, and that doesn't seem like that's going to be possible. So I opted to do this. But there will be a time. But even in the meantime, it's important to keep the vision alive and to ask, what is this experience added to that vision? What can it add? What are the gifts that we can add to a larger, more dynamic, more expressive vision for our beloved Unity Church of the Hills? So now the final time I'd like you to type into the chat your heartfelt responses, and I know your board is very eager to hear this from you. So the last plank is casting a larger vision. I'd like you to type into the chat, my dreams and prayers for Unity Church of the Hills. My dreams and prayers for Unity Church of the Hills. And I'll give you about 5 minutes for this, and then we'll move into a wrap up. Thank you again for typing this in. Remember, everything's confidential and goes directly to the board. Nobody sees your responses. Thank you so much. Well, again, thank you. Thank you for such vibrant and heartfelt input. And you can continue to type that in as we continue to wrap this up. So here's the journey that we have taken together in the stages of bridging that I offer you this day. And it began with accepting change. And so we continue to create a new relationship with change going forward in our lives and also going forward as a spiritual community. That we don't see change as the demon, but as the field of opportunity. In the Bible, it says the fields are ripe, are white already unto the harvest. And truly, an immense field of great good is available for Unity Church of the Hills. And so we accept change and move forward as we start a bridge together. And then it was about honoring our feelings because the feelings definitely emerge as change happens, especially changes that are sad or difficult or hurtful or are shocking and unexpected. We have natural feelings, and that's because we're feeling beings, and thank God that we are, because that's an aspect of heart. And now we're learning a more appropriate relationship with feelings, that we just don't come from old stored up emotional stuff that gets triggered over and over again, but that we let these emotions and feelings come up to be recognized and honored. We don't get into the story or stay stuck in the quicksand of an old story, but we just let that sensation come up, and we just keep letting that come up, breathing into it. And eventually that energy moves out of us, and we're no longer a pain body with anger and hurt waiting to happen. And we honor the feelings, because that's important and healthy to do. And then there comes the point where we must surrender. Having really accepted the change rather than fighting it, pretending or resisting or clinging, honoring the feelings. It's time for transformation. It's time to surrender to something bigger than we even know. And yet we know that we're now ready to surrender, to let go, and to be moved into our greater yet to be. And those first three are the ones by which we begin to create a more healthy and transformative relationship with what has been. And the last three then begin to move us into what can be. So there comes a time then when it's time to get back in the game, because inevitably when we're shocked by things or there are great changes in our lives, we sometimes hunker down and pull back for a while. And that too is kind of natural. But there comes a time when, as was said to Roy Wiegels, get up, go back and play. The game isn't over yet. And the game of life isn't over. And there's a time when we have to bring our energies back, bring our heart back, and really dive in. Even though the ego self wants to say, no, you're just setting yourself up for pain again. Come on. Just keep judging, keep pushing away, keep in the past. But then when we open our hearts, we hear the voice of the inner spirit, the voice of the divine within us saying, you're meant to grow. Let's go. Let's move forward in this life. Fulfill more of your divine destiny. And then the next one, the fifth, was receiving the gifts. And this is to realize as we re-enter the game that we're bigger and better because of actually what happened before, that there were gifts in it. And we become very zealous to have those gifts, to not keep them unwrapped or undiscovered any longer, because that too impels us forward when we own those gifts. Just as when I realized the gift of my betrayal in my life, it opened me to a gift that has made everything in my life better. And I couldn't be more grateful for that experience. That's the transformational process. And then finally, we talked about casting a larger vision. What a wonderful journey we can make. And as I said, it's not that we do these just one after the other in a linear fashion. We keep these things alive in us regularly. But our intention is to keep moving, and to keep moving the process so that eventually we not only have a clearer vision, but we find ourselves, having crossed that bridge, we find ourselves in breakthrough territory. And that's when things get powerful. So in the book, Eat, Pray, Love, the book and movie, There's an Italian phrase that Elizabeth Gilbert brought forth called attraversiamo. Attraversiamo. And it means let us cross over. That's what I would say to us right now. Attraversiamo. Let us cross over. Let us cross over the limits, the losses, the fears, the self-doubt. Let us cross. And understand this, though. You and I, we never cross alone. The divine Spirit, Father, Mother, God, always walks with us in our crossings. So what is it that God wants you to cross over? I say attraversiamo. Cross that bridge. I invite you, if you are willing, to take a gentle breath and close your eyes. Take a gentle breath. And imagine a bridge before you. And imagine the bridge that is before Unity Church of the Hills. And with the clarity and the energy that we have co-created this afternoon, I invite you to place your hand on your heart. And envision yourself moving across the bridge from where you were to where you are seeking to be, from the past, crossing your bridge into your ideal future. See yourself stepping deliberately over this bridge by means of the stages we've talked about into your new future. And for a moment, I invite you, as you've crossed over your personal bridge, see what it looks like and how it feels. You're in breakthrough territory, in newness, in greater abundance. How does it look? How are you looking? And how are you feeling? And feel those feelings. Anchor that vision of the newness and the greatness of your life. See it in its beauty and its glory. And feel the joy, the sense of fulfillment, the passion and the enthusiasm and the gratitude for the transformative essence of life and of the Spirit that has seen you from what was to what is to be, from being stuck to your greater yet to be. See it, feel it, and own it. Yes, yes, I accept this and even more. And now sense our beloved Unity Church of the Hills. And imagine that this church community is crossing right now. You are the representatives, and you're crossing from what was from an old chapter in a very healthy and productive way into the newness that is seated within this precious spiritual community. Again, see yourself crossing that bridge as a representative of the whole community. And sense that as you do deliberately, lovingly, that something shifts in the collective consciousness of this community. That it's now about what is to be, about the good and the glory and the beauty of that which is to be. The God-intended, God-inspired Unity Church of the Hills. And stand in that newness. And see it. See this church filled to overflowing. See thousands of people tuning in to the live stream. See next geners flooding to this ministry. See youth being touched at early, precious, powerful ages in their lives. See the elders being seen as a fountain of wisdom and richness. See the arts and the music evolving to even greater stages. See whatever you see. That and more. And feel the joy of it, the power of it. Feel your own upliftment in this consciousness. See and sense that the right next senior minister or ministers is already known in the mind of God and is already being moved serendipitously into this new possibility. See this community led dynamically in a partnership with the congregation that cares. See it, feel it. And remembering that everything is twice created. First in mind as an idea, as a spiritual prototype, and then in form. I speak the word of great gratitude and assurance that we have completed first creation. And I bless the clearer vision and idea in every one of your hearts for your own life. No longer stuck in breakdown, but now abiding in breakthrough. And I know that this is so for Unity Church of the Hills. And I know that all good is unfolding. And I know that waves of gratitude and waves of love and waves of shared support are rippling through this community. And it is good and very good. I speak a blessing upon you and upon this beautiful spiritual community as we accept the invitation of life into greater newness and into transformation. And I give thanks. Oh, I feel overflowing thanks that life is always becoming by means of us into greater and greater glory. The one who has begun a good work in you is completing it, is fulfilling it, is evolving it. And the Holy One who has created a good work in Unity Church of the Hills is indeed leading all of us to grow it, bless it, and evolve it into its greater yet to be. And for this, I give abundant thanks. I give thanks for our shared time. I speak a blessing for the Board of Trustees and for the staff and for the licensed teachers and for all the volunteers who serve so lovingly, that we are uplifted and sustained in this time of change, and we know exactly what to do to bring the highest and best out of it. And for all of these beautiful souls and all of us who have been together this day, I give thanks. I know the hand of the divine is upon every one of our hearts. So all is well, divinely well. And we let it be so, and so it is. Amen and amen. All right, beloved ones, what a rich and wonderful time. It always helps me to hear this stuff, and I pray it's supported you. Now, reach out if you have any more input, and I want you to know that committees have been put in place to begin the process of searching for and finding a candidate, the right person to be the next senior minister. So including your prayers that these teams, there's a prayer team, there's a marketing and promotion team, and then there's the core candidating team, that they're all blessed and guided. They too are loving members of this congregation, beyond the board, and the board is assisting them and they're assisting the board. So reach out if you have more input, and I invite you to keep Unity Church of the Hills in your prayers. And a congregational prayer has been authored by the prayer team of one of the three candidating teams, and will be distributed to you soon, so that you'll have an actual prayer that you can read or listen to. I'm not sure quite how they're going to distribute it, that you can join in consciousness, knowing that the right and perfect next chapter is unfolding, and your right next leader is already known in the mind and heart of God. So remember, the best is yet to be. I love you and I thank you, and may you have the rest of a beautiful day, and may you abide and enjoy your breakthrough territory. See you next time.